Hello, welcome to another Sonic Lab review. I'm Tosh from Widge Productions, and now we're going to be looking at a couple of plugins recently released from Universal Audio for their UAD2 platform. We've got the Manley Very Mu tube limiter and the Vertigo Sound VSC-2 plugin emulations. So both these compressor plugins carry on in the UAD tradition of choosing high-end studio gear, meticulously modelling the audio path and the characteristics and controls of these devices and presenting them in plugin format. So here we have the Manley Very Mu, which is a very well-known tube-based compressor, much in the vein of the Fairchild 670, which we reviewed a while back. So it's known for its smooth, silky and very transparent compression characteristics, and is a studio favourite for individual tracks, track groupings, entire mixes and mastering as well. Also here we have the Vertigo Sound VSC-2, which is a quad VCA compressor. Quad VCA because it has four voltage controlled amplifiers in it, one which is the gain reduction element and one the side chain for each channel, so that makes four. Again, this is a well-known and highly regarded piece of equipment, a very versatile compressor, and as we'll see later, that has its particular characteristics. In both cases, the entire audio circuit's been modelled, and as a result, the coloration and the sonic textures of these devices have been captured. So in the case of the Very Mu, we're talking about the sound of tubes and transformers. With the Vertigo VSC, that uses discrete VCAs, so rather than using IC chips, ICs for the amplifiers and compression elements, these are individual components put together to create the VCAs. So that imparts the sonic character, and the more you push these devices, the more of that sonic character will come out. Okay, so as ever, we have some beautifully rendered UIs here of the actual hardware. If we come in a bit closer and have a look. So for the Very Mu, we've got everything we'd expect to see. We've got your gain reduction meters, the release rate, 5 positions from slow to fast, and then output gain, input gain, variable attack and threshold. And then it's split into 2 channels, which can either be left, right, or mid-side, and I'll come on to that a bit later. You've got a switch here which decides whether you're compressing or limiting, which effectively changes the ratio. And you've got a few more additional controls here. We've got bypass switching, a high-pass filter on the side chain, so you can change its response to low-frequency information. A headroom control, which is a plug-in-only control, and this basically allows you to drive the compressor harder, so it sets the reference level inside to be higher if you turn up or lower. So it effectively controls how much distortion you're going to get out of the system. You can link the side chains or have them independent. So particularly if you're doing mid-side, you want to have separate control over each channel. And you can also link the controls so they work independently. And another thing which I think is very useful and which should really be appearing on all plugins in this day and age is a dry-wet blend over here, which it doesn't appear on the hardware, so this is a plug-in only feature, which allows you to easily set up parallel compression, for example. I also think things like mid-side encoder and decoder should be standard now on all these plugins, just to give you that extra utility. Okay, let's have a look at the Vertigo VSC-2. Again, everything you'd expect. Threshold controls over here. The ratio moving from soft to brick wall limiting. Discrete attack settings and release with an auto release, and makeup gain. Now you can have them as stereo link pair, or you can unlink them and have them as individual channels, which on its own isn't particularly useful, and this is where I think the addition of a mid-side matrix here would make it a lot more useful. And again, I think it's not that much to do, so it would be a useful addition, and then you could have a mid-channel and side channel, for example. You've also got 2 different filter cutoffs there, 60 Hz and 90 Hz, and you gain reduction meters, and that's about it for this one. Let's get on to some audio examples. Here we've got a nice drum track, and as a way of getting the size of these devices and hearing what their character is like, passing a drum track through it and driving it is a good way to find this out. So let's put up the VSC-2 to start with. So bring it in. Now I don't know if you'll be able to hear that, probably not over the internet, but there is a slight coloration there already, even though the compressor's not doing anything, but it's very subtle. Now I'll start bringing the threshold down. And you can start getting some compression in there. You can hear that. Now I'm using soft ratio, which is a very gentle onset of compression, but I've got the attack down to 0.1, so it's a very fast attack and it's cutting those transients out. Let's lift that. So there you go, with a slower attack I've still got the punch of the drums in there. Let's compress harder. In fact, let's go all the way down and squash this and hear how this is going to sound. So bring up some makeup gain. So if you want to dirty up your drums, that's quite a nasty sound there, you can use that to good effect. Now here's where if you had a wet dry mix, it would be quite nice to use that in parallel. Well, let's go back to something a bit more subtle. Take the levels back up. So with it out, let's pull that back into slightly high. That's got a nice bit of drum compression there. Now the ratio control is compensated for equal loudness, so it means you can compare different ratios without having to adjust your level. Okay, so that's the VSC-2. Now let's see what the Manley does. So let's kick it in. So at the moment we've got nothing going on. I've got the two channels linked and I'm in stereo mode. So let's start bringing the threshold down. Now I'm going to take it all the way to extreme settings just so you can hear what the distortion really sounds like from this. So we'll push the attack, recovery, drive the input, and the output. Quite a nice crunchy sound. Now I can go even further. I can push the headroom control up, which effectively reduces the headroom. So this is it maxed out and is as dirty as this compressor will get, which isn't particularly dirty, but that's not really what it's designed for. Now I can blend that back in using the wet-dry control. So I can have varying levels of dirt and punch. So let's go away from such extreme settings. So back off the attack. Have something a bit more typical now. So drive up, output. So just a quick comparison. Bring the levels to match. You can hear the colour as well as the compression there. So, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a mid-side matrix on here, which is useful if you want to do some sort of stereo widening of your sound. So if we click that in, so both channels are now active. This side is controlling the mids, and this is the sides. I'll unlink the side chains and unlink the control. So I've got completely independent control now of the compression on the mids and the sides. So let's drive the input a bit more. For example, let's take the threshold down. So we're not really compressing the sides. I'm going to compress the front end a bit more. Increase that. So if I take it out now, compensate for the level. Hopefully you can hear, the change in the width, and I'll make it a bit more extreme now. Let's compress the sides quite a lot and reduce the compression on the mid channel. So quite a pleasant widening effect along with the compression. Okay, so that's an example on drums. Now, as I said, these units are being used on individual instruments, on groups of instruments, mix buses and mastering setups. So let's have a look at a couple of other examples. Okay, so in this example, I'm going to have a look at using these compressors as sort of percussion glue, if you like. So here's a percussion track. This is the work of one guy layering up cajon and various bits of hand percussion and bongo. It's quite a nice little groove there. So I'm going to use the VSC-2 first. Let's have a listen to what that does. Let's compensate for that level change first. Without. So I've got quite long attack times here, letting those initial transients through. I can bring the release down. Let's try pushing the ratios up. I quite like it where it was. I mean, quite a gentle compression. You see over here I'm only taking a couple of dB off. So without and with, and it's kind of bringing a nice presence to it all and tying it all together. So let's see the same job now with the Very Mu. So let's go. So here we're getting about between 1 and 2 dB compression, medium attack and a fast release. If I take it out, now it's a much more subtle effect, has to be said. It's quite hard to hear clearly what you're doing. Let's push it a bit harder. So now we're taking a bit more out, compensate with the level. Now I don't know if you can hear that, it's a subtle warmth as well as pulling it all together. We're not talking about major effects compared to the drum track example I gave you earlier. This is a much more subtle example of the system. Okay, so let's move on to another example. I'm going to return to a particular love of mine, which is Latin music. I'm going to use a track here by Timbertera, a bit of salsa romantica. So here's the track, and we're going to have a listen to what these compressors sound like on the mix bus. So let's go in first with the Manley. So you can notice, as soon as I kick it in, there's a change in the tonality of the overall mix. I'll take it out. Adjust the level a bit so we're not mugging ourselves. What you can hear there, so we're not actually doing much compression at all. You can see the meters are slightly moving. But that's mainly the sound of the tubes and transformers that have been emulated. And there's a lovely warmth to that. So let's start pulling the gain reduction up a little bit. We're going to go for nice slowish attack time, medium recovery. So we're pulling about 1 to 2 dB gain reduction. Increase the output. Compressor off. Maybe trim that a little bit. That's with it out. Back in again. So what I'm hearing there is it's warm, it's a nice warm sound, and very gentle, transparent compression. Obviously you can push this harder. It always sounds very musical, this compressor. Okay, so let's have a listen to the VSC-2 and see how it performs doing the same job. So again, track without anything on. Now I'll switch on the compressor.
Only once in my life.
So it's much more subtle now, the actual coloration that the compressor brings compared to the very new. Let's bring the threshold down. So we've got about 1 dB gain reduction. So this would be a typical setup for bus compression. Very gentle, long attack times, automatic release, very soft knee, low ratio compression. Let's take it out. And in. If you can hear that, it's bringing things forward and kind of gluing it together, really. Out. In. If I bounce to the end section of this tune, a bit more going on there. Out. In. Compare that with a Manley. In. There's a bit of a level difference there. Again. So there you go, on the mix bus, you can see the subtle but definitely noticeable effect both these devices bring to the overall mix. Let's have a look at a vocal example now. So we'll go in with a very mute. Take it out. So what we've got is very subtle and transparent compression, even though we're pulling a fair bit of gain reduction there. Let's push it harder. Take the attack up. Go from the top again. Make it a bit more aggressive. It still remains very musical. I think that's one of the key things about this compressor. Even though you're pulling quite large gain reductions, it has a transparency to it. Take it out. And there's also that kind of pillowy warming effect, which may or may not be to your taste depending on your application. Let's have a listen to the VSC on the same track.
En el corazón, solamente una vez.
If you can hear that, the way I characterise this compressor is there's a definite presence or bite to it compared to the very new. So if we pull some more compression,
I wanna feel all your love, baby.
let's increase the ratio. Let's be a bit more aggressive with it. Probably not somewhere where you'd want to go with a vocal track, but just shows you the range of control you have. If you want to heavily compress that vocal.
Inside of my heart, I wanna feel all your
You've got that
option there, baby.
Okay, and finally, let's have a listen to the horns. We've got trumpet and trombone. This is another good way to hear the character of the compressors. Let's have a listen to the VSC. So we've got a ratio of 8, quite a slow attack time, auto release. Let's keep the ratio, sorry, the attack there, bring the release up so it's faster release. So without, gain compensate. Quite like what that's doing to the overall sound as well. Let's change a few of those parameters up. Let's go quite bring the gain compensation up. So quite heavy compression there. There you go, you get the idea of what that particular compressor sounds like. Let's hear what the Manley does now. Now if you've noticed, I've split the side chains and put it in mid-side mode, so I'm also using this to widen the stereo image of the horns, which you can hear if you're listening in stereo. Take it out, put it in, and then I might go more aggressively on the mid. Or back off a bit, put that in compress mode and leave the sides in limit mode. So before that horn loop drives you nuts, well, let's stop there. Now admittedly, some of the differences between these devices are pretty subtle, especially when we were looking at the full mix and even on some of the individual instruments. So I thought it would be quite useful just to show you the compression curves of the hardware devices at least. So this is the VSC-2, and you can see in soft mode it's got a very, very gentle early onset smooth compression, and as you increase the ratio, the knee's getting harder and harder until you're up there on brick limiting. With the Manley, these two are for compressor mode and this is in limit mode. You can see it's always a very gentle, smooth curve, even in limit mode, except when you're up at a maximum threshold, which explains in part, that the sonic nature of those. This one is more subtle, without a doubt. And there you have it, the Manley Very Mu compressor and the Vertigo Sound VSC-2 VCA compressor, both available now for the UAD2 platform via the UAD store. Worth noting that the VSC-2 has actually been developed by Brainworx, so it's also available to non-UAD users via Plugin Alliance. They're both retailing at $299, and as with all UAD plugins, you can trial them for 14 days before you actually commit to buying. Thanks for watching again and listening, and I hope you found that a useful and interesting review of these two plugins.